Okay, well, welcome everyone back to the Process Champion Network, PCN for short. This is going to be the first series with this year in mind, 2025 to 2026. I just took a look back in time, and we started the PCN in 2022. So we've been doing this for three going on 4 years now. And as Chris mentioned earlier, the growth has been amazing. Organic growth, we're getting great traction here with the PCN. And I love to see it keep growing. So I'm happy to see everyone on the call today. It looks like we have 40 participants. Gone are the days we would have 10 people on the call. So we're in good company. Today's topic is going to be around process facilitation. And the agenda today is going to be some light announcements and updates from our team. We'll jump into some process facilitation best practices and tips from what we've learned and experienced as a BPMO team. And then to close out with some BPMO support resources to kind of help you buffer all the great stuff that we're talking about today. So first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that we have over 40 people on the call today. So if you are brand new to the Process Champion Network, go ahead and introduce yourself, whether you want to raise your hand and come off mute, or go ahead and put your introductions in the chat. You can go ahead and specify your role, your team, where you're coming from, and your organization. So if we have any new members, feel free to pipe up.
You've been gone for a while and you want to reintroduce yourself, feel free. Nicholas, go ahead. You're unmute still.
Right. Unmuting. My name is Nicholas. Nice to meet you all. I'm an HR generalist too with the Share region, looking to push more in this direction and get involved in more process improvement stuff. And I'm very happy to see you all today and get to work.
Nice to see you again, Nicholas.
Nice to see you too.
Caitlin?
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm with BAM-PFA, the Berkeley Art Museum. And I did the Lean Sigma 6 yellow belt training a few months ago. And I thought it would be a great idea to, join this group. We're doing a lot of process improvement here at BAM-PFA. We're doing like a full Asana implementation, amongst other things. So I thought this would be helpful in that. Thanks.
Awesome. Welcome, Caitlin. Liam?
Hi, everybody. My name is Liam Chavez. I am an operations manager for the social impact team and the Career Services Center at the School of Public Health. I am also a newly certified yellow belt. I got to take a class with Mike a couple weeks ago, which was way too much fun, in my opinion. So I'm very excited to be here and continue learning and hopefully, making some changes in my department.
Was Lean Six Sigma fun because of Mike's dad jokes, or was it just fun and good in general?
Can I say both? I really
Okay.
enjoyed the Lego game, like probably more than the average person.
Are you saying you enjoyed the Lego game more than Mike's dad jokes? We're really working on Mike's dad jokes because he likes to tell us how good they are. So,
But they are good, first of all. And secondly, I'm not going to be here for the September 4th class. So for those of you taking September 4th, I'm sorry that you're going to miss.
Don't worry, I've studied his dad jokes. I'm coming with an arsenal.
Welcome, Liam. I think we've got 3 new people in the chat, so I'll go ahead and just highlight those. We have Denise, who's an academic HR analyst from the School of Social Welfare. Welcome, Denise. We also have Amanda, who's coming from the Energy and Resources group in the College of Natural Resources. And we also have Kristen coming from UDAR, who is a senior business analyst for information strategy and analytics reporting. Oh, and we have quite a few others. Let me scroll down. We also have Tayo, who is a project analyst in the Office of the Associate Vice Chancellor for Housing and Dining Services. And Janice, nice to see you, who is the Facilities and Operations Manager for the School of Public Health. In addition, we have Diane, who is a department manager in nutritional sciences and toxicology in the College of Natural Resources, and then Carl with supply chain management. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for the introductions. Okay, getting into a few announcements here, and I'll let Mike kind of buffer anything I might leave out here. Process Jam, we're going to launch our first process-centric event at UC Berkeley, and we're affectionately calling it the Process Jam. This is going to happen in the month of October. I believe Mike has already sent out an introductory save the date email for the Process Jam event. He can tell you a little bit more. But we do have an interest survey. If you guys are interested in filling out this survey, this is going to help our organizers plan an exciting event and an engaging event for you guys during the last week of October. We do have a couple different things coming up before we actually hold the event in the end of October, like yellow belt training, as you can see on the second bullet point. And we also have a PCN earlier in that month. So we have two offerings for Lean Six Sigma. We have yellow belt training and we also have green belt training. And you can see some of the upcoming dates listed on the bullet points. So some in early October and then in the mid-October timeframe.
And for anyone who's interested, the slide deck is attached to the email and the calendar invite, and the survey and links to registration are included in this announcement slide.
Yeah, I also want to add, thanks, Priya. I also want to add for October, we're most likely going to add additional yellow belt trainings for leading up to the Process Jam event. So when I come back, I'm gonna be out for the next week and a half. But when I come back, week of September 8th, I will put them on the calendar and on the website for people to register. All right.
Awesome. All right. So as I mentioned right at the beginning of the call, this is a new year for our PCN. So 6 new sessions. As promised, we like to keep it snippy. So we like to engage with you for 1 hour, 6 times a year. So that's 6 hours of process if you haven't thought about process at any other time during your year. So let's look at that roadmap and see what's coming up next for the coming months. So we do PCN sessions every other month. So this month, our topic is around best practices process facilitation. And I just want to note all the topics that you see across the screen here on the roadmap, these actually came from you. So I think in our last PCN session, we sent out a survey and we said, hey, we've done a lot of these sessions. What have you liked? What are you still craving to hear for? And what do you want to learn new? And so these are the topics that came at top of mind from all of you. So today we'll talk about process facilitation best practices. In October, which is our process month, we'll help you connect change management with process improvement projects. In December, Mike's going to start hosting a root cause analysis, and then followed up in February by utilizing AI for processes, which I know is a new subject here for us. In April, we'll close it out with Lean Six Sigma in action. And then June, we'll look at how we get process to stick as a new normal, getting that buy-in from our teams. So if there are any topics that kind of spark your brain about something you might want to present or share a story, feel free to let us know later on, and we would love to have you be showcased in any of the process sessions coming up. Awesome, and I'll hand it over to Nick for the bulk of the process facilitation topic.
All right, thank you, Priya. This is definitely a topic that I'm very happy to get the opportunity to be one of the BPMO members to, share and kind of facilitate this conversation, because this is something, one, we do a lot of and I really enjoy. Being able to look at kind of what does it mean to facilitate or being a facilitator. And when you look at this and the work that we do, both in our project management work, process improvement work. So we're really bringing together groups of individuals and trying to help them come together around a decision, a generation of ideas, and we're trying to help create that environment and guide them through that journey of arriving at whatever that kind of collaborative, participatory goal of, what they're trying to bring that ideas around. So in what I kind of call out, this is definitely a entire skill set, an entire discipline that a lot of people spend years building up and learning how to do well. For some, this is actually their career. They are a consultant that goes into places and they'll facilitate for groups. They'll get called in just for that. So when I call out, there are other resources for anyone who's interested in building this skill set for themselves. There is a community of practice on campus for the Berkeley Facilitators Network that is focused on this as well. Myself and a lot of our team within BPMO, we had gone to trainings from an external vendor. So you see there, Sam Kainer, the community at work. Fantastic training, opened my eyes to a much more broader importance of how we do facilitation. So just want to kind of acknowledge again that, as we've brought different disciplines and methodologies in kind of that connection point with process in the past, like when we talked about project management and change management, how it intersects with process improvement. It's the same thing here when we look at facilitation. So we're going to very briefly in our short time together focus on facilitation, but through the lens of process improvement and process documentation. So definitely, I encourage you, if you enjoy this area of work, if you start trying to do this in your teams, it is a definite skill set that will serve you well if you continue to build on it. So what we're going to touch on today is kind of the work that you need to do to be prepared for leading a facilitation session, what it means to kind of create this collaborative space that will allow for the group you're facilitating to be able to share ideas, some of the tools and ways that you'll gather that group and spend time in that discussion. And then we'll talk about some of the other best practices and tools that we've experienced as we've done facilitations and process work here on campus. So I'm going to start off with, before you even step into the room and you're going to do a facilitation session, there's some work that you need to do to be prepared. It's always important to understand kind of what is the goal we're trying to achieve with this session. Are you stepping into something where there's a process improvement, something we're trying to solve and improve? Are we stepping into a discussion where we're trying to understand a particular problem or generate ideas? So understanding that will help you make sure that you are selecting the right tools and even making sure you're inviting the right people to this session. Apologies. So some of the things that we do on the pre-work side, especially when we're thinking about kind of a process related facilitation, if I'm going to be doing a process improvement effort, one of the things we want to make sure is before we jump to that point, do we even have current state documentation? Has the department, the team that you're working with, do they actually have documentation? Is the current state process known? And if it isn't, I would say you stop there before you walk into a facilitation. You really take a step back and you know that you need to start with processing the current state, understanding where things are. If you're going to be leading a process improvement project, one of the things that we always lead off with on project side is, have you established a charter? So you have an understanding, like, what are we trying to solve? What is the goal of the project? Do you have a sponsor that's been identified? Has there been like some kind of communication and kickoff with the team that you're going to invite to that facilitated session? So you're not just some random person that's inviting this group together that, you're inviting them and not really telling them the why and the who and, what's the reason that your department is coming around this particular subject. And then last things around the logistics, are you doing an in-person facilitation? Are you going to be gathering in Zoom and getting those things ready and set up? So you want to make sure that a communication invite is being sent out from a sponsor, a functional owner, a process owner, a project sponsor, whatever makes sense for the work that you're doing, who's kind of being the guiding light behind this particular work. The next step when you actually are going to be in front of a group, and some of the first things that we try and do is, especially if this is your teams that you can be facilitating, they maybe haven't done a lot of kind of collaborative idea generation or things of this nature. Establishing kind of these norms that everyone kind of understands kind of around this facilitation, these kind of shared collaborative expectations that the team looks at. We try and establish these as kind of a understanding of what this session is going to be like, what the role for the individuals there. And this is around their, their ability to share, make it a safe environment for them. So as an example, some of the times we've done facilitations, we'll have a version of this that we bring But the first discussion we have with the group is to say, here's a example of some norms for this meeting or this session that we're going to have. What would you like to add to this? What would you like to change? What works best for your group? So it even gets them starting off with this idea of understanding of this kind of participatory, um, bringing together and making decisions as a group. And so I'm going to pause there and ask if anyone has any questions, and also if anyone from my team would like to share experiences that they've had with kind of this first step. We've done a lot in facilitation.
I would just also, if there's anything on here that doesn't make sense, let's take a moment to make sure that these things, there's not any on here that you have questions, or they're written in a way that might be a little funky. Does anybody see anything on here that doesn't make sense that they would like to even challenge? I think this is an important thing, because when you're in the room, you also want to allow people that space to say, hey, I don't agree with this, or you really got to get people in agreement here.
I feel like, hi everybody, I'm Amanda. I wonder if you think number 8, one person, one vote, no position rank, is true of every facilitated conversation? Because I know for me, it's not true of every meeting. Sometimes you go in and it's going to be getting buy-in, but this isn't really an open discussion. This is,
Yeah, and I can address that, and then others.
yeah.
So I would say that a facilitation is much different than a meeting
Mhm.
oftentimes. And setting that groundwork and what Nick said in the beginning about like why are we here? So I think what facilitation really is participatory decision making, right? You have a group of people, the facilitator is guiding people to try to get us to an answer, right? And that might be take numerous steps. The difference between not having everybody not having a vote in, say, a meeting, that should be addressed up front, right? Like, hey, we're here, this is the decision we're being made, and everybody's vote might not be equal, right? If there are executives that are the ultimate decision. In this type of facilitation, we are really leaning towards, and you'll see one tactic, dot voting, for example. That's a vote. Everybody in the room has a dot, no matter whether you are a vice chancellor or whatever other role you have, everybody gets a dot, right? That's what number 8 really means. And if this is on the screen when we walk in this room, we really mean that. So
Mhm.
I would be really clear. You ask a very good question, Amanda. And I think in this context, when this is on the screen, that's what this means.
Mhm.
And it's a
And then
great
yeah, go ahead.
It's a great question too. Of is the like a supervisor even in the room, and what is their role as a part of this group you're facilitating?
Mhm.
Have they taken action to um, empower those who were invited to be a part of this to have a say? And
Mhm.
those are things that you have to also be aware of. Now, in a lot of the cases where some of you may be starting to document processes or improving processes in your departments, you have an awareness of this. If you're a facilitator like us coming from outside, sometimes we have to have conversations with a project owner, a functional owner to understand the current state of things and get a feel for what we're walking into.
Mhm.
But just like we had this quick conversation around your reactions to these, when we put this in front of a group, those kind of conversations come up and it starts setting the expectations for what are we trying to do and how are we trying to do it as a group.
Mhm.
So, Harpreet, I see you have your hand up as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of follow up on Amanda's question and then add one more. Um, I was wondering about point 13 and point 8. I recently learned that what I was thinking actually has a name. I did not know that earlier. HIPPO, like highest paid person's opinion. So when I I was like, yes, of course, like in most of the meetings that I have been part of, like, there is all this emphasis on all the things in different ways what are stated here. But I also think like in the end, either everyone sort of coalesces around that hippo thing, or that is what like sort of goes. So I'm wondering, how is it that, is there a way that that could be changed? And also, I would be managing 10 people very shortly. So I'm wondering, like, how some people they are just not talkers in a meeting. I'm one of those people. Like, this is not my norm. I'm an introvert. So, is there a way like to encourage them gently and not sounding like you are paying too much attention to this person that you want them to talk and all these other people who are contributing, and so that they don't feel like, they are contributing and their contribution is any less, but we are trying to encourage some other people to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of these we touch on a little bit later as well, but it's great to talk to it here. There's a lot of different tactics that you can use as a facilitator to try and make sure that you're getting input from everyone that's been invited to that session. The reason they've been invited to that session is you know that they have expertise that you're trying to include in this participatory kind of conversation and leading towards whatever ideation or decision that's being made. So if you have people that are dominating a conversation and you're not getting input from everyone, then you're leaving potentially some of the best ideas not even heard. So when those things are happening as a facilitator and you see those, there are things that where you can have individual writing that then is done on stickies that are then brought up so that ideas are shared and then discussed without even necessarily needing to have names attached to them, which sometimes will give people more comfort in expressing those ideas. And some of these things are also a little more different, whether you've got a group of 5 or if you've got a group of 20. So there's different tools that you will kind of learn and pick out. And again, we have 20 to 30 minutes today, so we can't delve into that real truly deep tactics, but there's a lot of different ways that you can address those things for that.
Nick, can I add?
Absolutely,
Sorry.
yeah.
I was just going to add one more piece. Harpreet, the other big thing is to really offer at the end of a session, during a session, is to offer alternative means of communication. So if this is an in-person session and you know these people won't speak up and you don't want to really point them out, always offer, please email me, or some sort of behind confidentiality written aspect. So that's another accessible means that somebody might be able to approach. So you have to be creative of making sure you provide all avenues. That's number one. The other comment I'd like to bring to the table, which is something you brought up, and I don't want to go too long here, is the concept of group think. So when I say participatory decision making, I am not, groupthink is actually a negative concept. And both you and Amanda are alluding to that. And what that means is if there is, okay, you use the term hippo or whatever it may be, the highest paid person in the room, when everybody coalesces around that agreement because that person is in the room, we want to not encourage that. And there are many tactics to help break down groupthink. So what I would encourage you to do, because we only have this small time, if you are really interested in growing in this area, do some research on groupthink and we can help you about what those specific tactics are of making a holistic environment where we're not just following either the loudest voice, the highest paid person. But groupthink is really what we're trying to break down here. We're trying to provide a safe space where even if you disagree, it is very comfortable for you to be able to voice that. We might still go with a decision because the whole group, you don't have to agree with that. What we really need to do is respectfully disagree. That's okay, right? Having these, that's why we have to have, that's why facilitation exists, is to allow the space. It might, the decision of the group might go a direction that you don't agree with. That's okay. So
And
groupthink and alternative means of communication that might not be vocal are the two answers I would provide to your questions.
and we do touch on the feedback at the end as well. And I'll say too, for myself, I am an incredible introvert, and I also need to process things before I'm ready to give a opinion. So when I'm being facilitated in a meeting, I'm one of those that's going to sit there silent for a little bit and so have the wheels turning. So you have different types of people that are going to respond in different ways. And yet, as a facilitator, you need to try and give the opportunity for those voices to be heard. And Isabel.
Hey, I'm really glad you mentioned that about different like extrovert introverts because in a very contentious project that I was on, the facilitator was just masterful at engaging people like that and doing it very equitably. He actually went to every single person. It was back when we were in person, so it was a little easier to do this, but it was very contentious, so we had to bring in lots of stakeholders. And in that, he actually went around, gave every person a moment to say something,
and allow them to skip or come back to them. And in that environment, I guess maybe in some cases they're like, I just have to say something because I'm being called on. But it actually did allow every person to speak. So I was really surprised to see there were a lot of people who I guess you wouldn't necessarily, I mean, everyone should be allowed to, and yet a lot of people won't say anything. But when given a chance, they did say something. So that was one of my favorite times seeing that, and I try to bring that as well. So if you ever have an opportunity or enough time to actually go through and every person's name, which is really like tough on some people who don't want to speak, but it's like it's okay, you can skip and not say anything, but we're just letting you have a chance, you know. You always have those people who dominate the calls.
Yeah, one thing I'll say too is, again, taking this from the larger discipline to how we use this in process facilitation. When you're looking at a process and you've got process performers, customers, and functional owners in that group that you're facilitating, there's a lot of natural discussions of like the handoffs of the work, and that also helps engage. So in some ways, because the process has those handoffs, it helps pull in people from those different roles to be a participant in the discussions of what comes before and how things come to them and how it goes out from their work to those that are downstream. All right, so moving on to a little bit, so quick tips for the facilitator. So really, a lot of this is just around the idea of trying to create that space for the participants of your facilitation to be able to express their ideas. So again, you want to try and make sure it's a fun and positive area. You don't one of the worst things you could ever do as a facilitator is shut down an idea. You just lost your entire group at that point, if that's what you do. There may be things where you reframe, redirect, bring them back to the focus of a topic, and we're going to come back to capturing some of those things in one of the leader slides too as well. And I'll call out something a little interesting here too. There's on the don'ts, there's the don't be the one doing all the talking, don't be the one with all the answers. You're the facilitator, you might mirror what you're hearing from people and express it back to them, make sure everyone's on the same page, those kind of things. But you're trying to get the ideas from the group you're facilitating. You're not leading the conversation. You're asking questions to prompt them and guide them and bring them through this journey. Now, in a lot of cases, you may be a part of the department or the process that you have a stake in it. You're not just a neutral facilitator coming in as part of the project. So that becomes very interesting when you are knowledgeable. You actually know the process. You're a participant and the facilitator. That brings an entire other dynamic where you have to be careful when giving your own opinions if you're trying to be the facilitator. And you also have a very strong power to lead the conversation in a direction that others don't. So just one thing to be aware of, that when you're facilitating your own people, your own staff, the people that are part of your team, so that's something to be aware of. Any other thoughts or questions on this slide? Okay. So when we think about how we gather over this group around facilitation, there's a lot of different tools that you might be using. So there's way more than what we've got listed here, but these are a little more of kind of process focused kind of lens. So you might do a lot of work, whether brainstorming or doing flow diagrams on a whiteboard or some type of other, kind of process diagram drawing tool, whether it's Lucidchart or Visio. You might be doing things live in Process Manager and capturing the flow of a process as you're facilitating the group and discussing, what does the process look like in its current state, or the pain points or the future state you're trying to do. Sticky notes up on a board, chart writing, and I'm going to express vulnerability here. When we did the training about facilitation, my mind was open that chart writing in and of itself is a huge skill that I sorely lacked. My penmanship was so bad, and the idea of alternating and big writing and block letters and those kind of things. So we spent years after the training developing these skills, and then all of a sudden COVID hits and remote work and environments like this became more of our norm. So we had to learn a lot of what we were doing well in person and how to take that and express it in this kind of remote environment. So, there's a lot of these different tools that you have to figure out how best to use when you're facilitating a group. We started using online whiteboards as well. Sometimes, especially if it's new for your team, we started using Miro, which is a whiteboard where you can create stickies and move things around. Great for kind of idea generation. But we also learned we had to, people who haven't used it before, we had to spend time at the start of a facilitation session and say, okay, here's how you do this. Here's how you create a sticky. Here's how you move it. Give them a little test area to create a sticky for their name and move it over. So these are things to be aware of when you're planning your facilitation. How are you going to be capturing and letting your team visualize the input that they're giving you? So again, right, depending on what you're trying to your facilitation's about, whether it's a process improvement, you might be doing root cause analysis using a fishbone. You might be documenting a current state and doing something as a sticky notes on a whiteboard in person, a whiteboard and remote. But there's a lot of different tools that you can use depending on what you're trying to accomplish in your facilitation. For our team, we do a lot of stickies both in person. I do a lot of stuff live and process manager, and a lot of our community here is practitioners of using that tool. So if you haven't looked at it yet, something that could help your team with documenting your processes. But this is all thoughts around, what are you going to be using for your facilitation and what aligns well with the goal you're trying to accomplish.
And we can help with the right tool for the right problem. So I don't want to overwhelm. There's a massive list of tools, and our office hours is a really good place. If you have a facilitation and you're trying to accomplish something, we can help you pick the appropriate tools. So just know that that's a resource available to you.
All right, so now we're going to get into a little more specific nuances of different process work and different facilitation tools or kind of preparations that you need to do, depending on what type of process work you're doing. So the three different tables we have here is if you're going to be looking at documenting a current state. We don't have current state documentation. The process is not really well known. We're going to be looking in that first bucket. If we're trying to improve a process that we do have documented and we are trying to address certain pain points in trying to improve the performance of that process, that second bucket is process improvement. The last one, I think this is one that maybe trips up a lot of people, is sometimes we're actually creating a new service or an entirely new process. So that's kind of designing a new process. And if you're in the Lean Six Sigma trainings, you might see kind of the methodology around this called DMADV, which is a way of looking at defining and understanding the needs of the process and then designing it from that point. So each of these, when we look at it from a lens of that facilitated session that you might be doing, there's some definite nuances around what you need to do to prepare, who you're going to have and in the session, and what goals you're trying to accomplish. So when we look at the current state, we're trying to understand how does the process actually work today. So in that case, we're really going to be focusing on our process performers, the people who do the work, and potentially you might include kind of the connection points of upstream or downstream processes. And I want to kind of contrast that to process improvements. If we're doing a facilitated session that's around process improvements, the audience that we need to include in our facilitation group could be much larger. In addition to the process performers, we're going to be looking at potentially including customers in that facilitation group, people who are, and I know the word customers can be challenging, but the idea is whoever this process is serving, you want them to be included in that facilitation potentially. If they're not able to be live in that session, you want to make sure their voice is something that has been gathered prior and informs the goal that that the group you're bringing together and what you're facilitating towards. the individual process owners. And one of the roles that's kind of optional, but we love including, is what you call a maverick, someone who's outside the process, someone who can be someone that asks the oddball questions or the, just helps ask the questions that maybe no one else is thinking about. And sometimes those questions can really help move the group past a block or bring up things that otherwise wouldn't get thought of. Sometimes as a facilitator, you can also take on that role of the maverick. And oftentimes our team, when we're coming into a project and we're coming from outside, whatever department we're helping to support, oftentimes, we'll ask questions that, maybe they may not be the right questions, related to the subject matter of the process, but we can ask questions that maybe help generate additional ideas. And the last one there is on Demavi, very much similar groups. The goals when we look at what we're trying to do in this facilitation on the current state, we're trying to arrive at documenting what is our current state process. And one of the things we want to call out here, and we're going to touch on also in the parking lot and the garden a little bit later, is you want to make sure you give an opportunity to capture and acknowledge when people start talking about, but can we do this better? Because when you talk about the process and what people do today, those kind of things are always going to come up. You don't want to lose them, but you also want to bring the conversation of facilitation back to accomplishing the goal of documenting, understanding the current state. So, Nicholas, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, could you illustrate like some of the kind of questions that a maverick might ask? Is it sort of in spirit like a devil's advocate, or is it a little bit different?
Devil's advocate, or just the idea of bringing up like, it's really hard for me to bring up a good example. I've been in a lot of sessions, especially with like HR and others, where, I might ask a question about how this might touch on some other process that maybe wasn't being thought about because they're so focused on the work that they do. And it may drive a connection point or a additional consideration that hadn't been on the radar for that group. So that's, one quick example, but it's definitely just an idea of having somebody in the room that, the idea like when you were writing a paper in in high school in English class, if you could hand it to grandma and grandma could understand it, then you did a good job. And sometimes having someone from outside that group kind of plays that same role. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Nathan.
I was just going to answer Nicholas's question by giving an answer. I often serve the Maverick role in the meetings I'm in, not because it's officially, I'm not knighted as the Maverick, but that's what I do. And an example that came to mind, I also worked in HR for a while. And the idea is, oh, we need the employee to sign this form. And then I will just say something like, well, my job is to like give out bad ideas so that you can tell me why my idea is bad, because then everybody can be on the same page. And so it may be the case that I just say something and then we all shoot it down, but we all know why we're shooting it down. So why do we need the employee to sign it? Can't they just log in with their credentials since that authenticates who they are? Oh no, the law says this. Really? Okay, where's that law? Help me out here.
Yep.
And then eventually, oh no, we don't even need a signature at all. And now we've just skipped this whole part of the process. So that's something that a Maverick could do, is just to ask, well, what if we just had them say yes verbally? What problem does that cause? And often the ideas will be bad and they're not helpful, but at least we all can get on the same page, which can then, bad ideas spark good ideas.
I like this. Very Socratic. I appreciate your answer. Thank you, Nathan.
All right, so again, to kind of the goals of what we're trying to accomplish in facilitating these different types of process work. When we're doing process improvement, we're focusing on identifying the issues we're trying to solve, the root causes, and generating solutions. When we're working on facilitating for like a new process, we're trying to understand what is the new process, the requirements it needs to meet, and then design the process based on that. Each of these have a little bit of different work that you need to have done beforehand. We've kind of touched on these in the past. Again, current state, you want to make sure you are get everyone on the same page of like what part of the process we are going to document. Process improvement, you will never hear us not say this enough. You don't work on process improvement until you understand your current state. So have that done before you step into that type of work. And again, kind of around designing a new process, again, defining where it begins and ends, and you got to focus on understanding what does that process need to be able to do? What is the build requirements that it needs to meet? All right, moving on a little bit to a little more around kind of best practices and tips for these types of facilitation. We touched on this a little earlier about, again, like, who is the decision maker? So is the decision maker in the room that you're facilitating? Is the group going to be facilitating a recommendation that is then shared to a decision maker? So those are important things for you to know and understand. Make sure it's also clear to your participants for your session. Again, you want to make sure you're providing a safe space for the ideas that are being generated and not shutting them down. And we also share this a lot, that when we're, especially process improvement, when we're trying to talk about like what's not working well, we want to focus on the process and not about the people. And we've had examples where people were being critical of a particular process, and potentially the person who maybe created that process even years ago may actually still be there. They might be in the room with you when those kind of critiques are being brought up. So focusing on the process and how do we move forward and improving it is kind of the guidance you want to give and kind of help bring that group around that direction. We've already touched on the loudest voice and some tactics around that. So a lot of the things that we were planning to look at was we kind of touched on already. The last one here, especially on projects, or if you're going to be coming into a group that you're not necessarily familiar with, kind of understanding what external factors are going on that may be an impact to the group that you're trying to facilitate, whether they're going through a reorg or there's certain personality clashes that are currently going on. Those will be useful for you to know as a facilitator. And if you're working within your own teams, these are things that you're likely already aware of. All right, I'm going to hand off to Priya for the last few slides.
Awesome. All right, so we have just a few minutes left on this meeting, so I will kind of blow through these slides, but you all should be pretty familiar. So something that comes near and dear from our team, Chris DeMarco, he's always a big idea guy. And we traditionally are so used to using the facilitative tool of the parking lot, which means, hey, somebody said something great, but probably not apropos for this particular session, but we don't want to lose sight of it. So let's put it in a parking lot. But Chris has come up with a better idea of the garden. So you'll see his lovely tulip drawing right in the right-hand side there. And what we like to use is the garden instead of the parking lot. Parking lot almost alludes that we're gonna never revisit it, or we're just parking it for now in this conversation, and this paper with your idea is gonna be shelved in somebody's office and never revisited. But the garden we use because we like to say that will allow ideas to grow. So something that might be helpful is, after your process session, if you're working with people in your department or different teams, maybe putting up that sticky note or that poster board of what the garden is and letting other people see the ideas, having it still be at the forefront of people's thoughts. So really allowing those ideas to actually be at the forefront instead of putting them as a placeholder in the parking lot. So Chris, that was awesome. And we do use that now in our process sessions. That is a pivot that our team has actually made from parking lot to garden.
I think I remember being in the session where Chris came up with that name. It was
Yep.
quite organic and it is stuck.
Yep. And he is a good gardener now, so I can attest that it works. And then one you're probably all familiar with, our team uses it all the time, is the plus delta. So this is really simply just at the end of your sessions, what worked well and what would you change? Just asking your group, very layman's terms, what did they like and what would they like to change for the next meeting before you move on and you do the same sort of facilitation. There might be things that your group could improve or they love to hold on to for the next few sessions. So we always encourage a plus delta at the end of every session. And then finally, closing out our conversation here on process facilitation, the one thing that we always like to do in our team is ensure that there's some documentation of the output of that session. So if you've all left there having made decisions, having understood the current state, or having made ideas for improvements for your future state, go ahead and honor all those great things by documenting it in the way that's appropriate and sharing that back out with your participants. So again, going back to the beginning of the conversation where we said there may be some quiet voices in the room. There may have been a loud voice in the room that appeared to be the decision maker, but is not actually our decision maker. This is a great roundabout kind of follow up, close the loop way of sharing back out with your participants and stakeholders to say, we've done some stuff in a room together. Let's make sure we all still feel validated and good about the agreements we made in the room. And
And
that's essentially going to help you move on to the next stage of the sessions.
And potentially that output of that session, you could share it with not just the participants from that session, but because they're obviously a lot of times they're representing a larger group. You might have 2 or 3 people from a role, but there's 20 or 30 people in your department that take on that. You could share that output to that larger group and ask them to continue to provide feedback as well. You couldn't have them all in the room, but they can react to what's been created by their peers, and that's facilitation.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I think that rounds us out for the content for today. I know we're at time, so if anyone needs to leave, feel free to hop off. We super appreciate you being here. But if you have some time to still stay on the call, we always love to hear back from you about challenges, successes that you're experiencing in your own teams, departments, projects, process facilitations. We'd love to hear it all. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. And this time is for you guys to pipe up and let us know what you guys are dealing with. Nick, I think if you go back a few slides. Yeah. Yep. If anyone likes to share.
Or even just reaction to today's content too. Tayo.
Yeah.
Hi, really like today's content. I echo a lot of the thoughts that people put in the chat about kind of seeing things differently, having a bit of a reframe from some of the techniques discussed here. Just the challenge that I'm encountering with what was initially a process improvement project, but absolutely just needs to be a documentation first because the process was never really spelled out. Is there's a lot of conflicting opinions on what the process looks like in practice. I'm not talking about what it should look like. I'm talking about what it looks like right now. And you talk to the different subject matter experts that own a different part and they see it differently. And part of the reason why is because they organize their information separately. Um, so I'm open to advice or suggestions on how do you kind of corral and align those conflicting perspectives. And I just wanted to voice that because it's front and center for me. And I'm curious if other folks experience that kind of clash.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just the fact that you're documenting the current state and while doing that, surfacing that there are these non-standardizations, variations, or exceptions, how people do things differently, that is a win. You now know more about how the process actually is today. So doing that work and capturing and understanding where there are the different ways that the process is being performed is great. It's a good start. Once you have that, then bringing the group together around trying to move towards a standardization, understanding why people do it a different way, you can start working towards a consensus around what is the way that we all say we should do it. So going from that current state of everything being done kind of in different ways based on who's doing it, based on who's requesting it, those kind of things, to a standardization is a huge, huge plus. And then from there, that gives you kind of that launching pad to move into process improvements.
Nick, can I add one of the things Nick's talking about, and Taylor, this may be valuable directly for you. When Nick shared the resources on this slide up front, he shared the Sam Kaner facilitation, and I don't want to harp too much on that because it's not process facilitation. However, without stealing Sam Kaner's thunder, he developed something called the groan zone. And I just want to touch on this for just a minute. Facilitation can be an emotional journey as you can say, this sounds like you're experiencing, and everybody does their work a little different. But what the groan zone is, and if you Google this and you look into this and you have interest, facilitation is about taking people on this journey where their thoughts start at a certain place and then they diverge. They go way outside and everybody goes in different directions. Part of facilitation is allowing that to happen because if you don't let the ideas diverge for a little while, they can't converge. So if you think about sort of the shape, he uses a shape and there's a picture of it, and I don't have it in front of me, but allowing thoughts to diverge at first and ideas all over the place. Then, as a facilitator, it's your job to take all those things and bring them together. And what Nick was alluding is you're actually winning by allowing those things to come out. Now you've got to get them to converge, which there's tools. And so I think someone's bringing up the groan zone here. And while this is not a process facilitation, it touches on emotional facilitation, which is hyper important as you become a better facilitator to understand the emotional space you're in and to allow hard emotions to flow. You will find yourself in a much better place, but it does not happen overnight, and it is a lot of pressure on a facilitator. So not to put more pressure on you, but just know that in the concept of the groan zone, and we can work with you at a minimum, understanding that this emotional journey you're on allows this space to happen is important and really good work as a starter. Is that helpful at all? And I know it's a lot to digest in here, and we can talk further about it, but
No, very helpful. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, for me, coming from a design background, I love the divergence and convergence and kind of a
yeah.
facilitation, right?
Yeah.
Allowing that space for everyone.
If you Google groan zone, you'll get it. Dive into Sam Cantor's work a little bit, and especially if you're a design thinker like this will really resonate because you already understand the concept of it. It's really powerful stuff. And it touches on emotion, right? This is an emotional, vulnerable journey with many people. If people have been doing their job a certain way for 30 years and they're asked to change, or this person over here is doing it differently, neither one is necessarily wrong, right? We have to allow that emotional space to happen. So part of facilitation is vulnerability, trust, and emotion. And those three things are super important, and they're also super hard because things like trust are not concrete. You don't build trust overnight. These are human psychological entities that tend to be really powerful in facilitative space. And we can talk more about that. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Nick, let's just jump to the next slide as I know we're right at the end of time here. So next topic coming up in October is going to be connecting change management to your process improvement projects. So we'll be talking about the symbiotic relationship between the two. And then again, just letting you guys know that PPMO has support resources for you. So if you want to follow up on anything you heard today, you have any other questions around process facilitation, improvement, project management, change management, you name it, attend those BPMO office hours. We hold them every Wednesday outside of the Wednesdays that we host PCN. And those are available by appointment or just go ahead and drop into the Zoom link, as well as we have process manager access and training on our website. So feel free to use this slide deck or contact us if you need any more information about either of those two. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a great PCN.